There's something I want to go over first before evaluating the premiere. For how I feel about Season 3 being shortened down to 13 episodes instead of 26 episodes, there's a large amount of skepticism I had, mostly for the sake of continuity. And despite the fact that William Anderson on DeviantArt stated that some seasons will be shorter than others in life, having half the amount of episodes for a season seemed to be a bit more risky. Now, to some benefit, it does cut the slack to the staff, especially since the amount of issues they had to deal with by no good, unhelpful soccer moms, and the time constraints and deadlines that they had to meet. At most, I hope to see more effort on the episodes they made, since they had more time on their hands. As someone addresses a lot, quality over quantity. Now, I don't by any means intend to pressure the staff for the better of them, but I also hope that the amount of praise they receive from the bronies won't let their guard down and lose their touch on the show's quality. But until then, we have 11 more episodes in production for Season 3, and it's only something to worry about later on. Now, with that said, on with the premiere of Season 3, The Crystal Empire. We begin as Twilight's given a test by Princess Celestia, but like no other she expected. She is lectured about a vanished city called the Crystal Empire. While it represents hope and love, a threatening king named Sombra once took over with hatred and placed all the ponies, known to be crystal ponies in this one, into absolute slavery. With the elements of harmony Celestia and Luna once had, he is banished to the ice of the Arctic North, but with the results of his attempts to vanish in the city in the first place for over 1,000 years by a curse. Within its return, Sombra, who is also back, tries to take over again in spirit. So Twilight is told to provide protection before havoc breaks loose again. She's thankfully not entirely alone.
Did you pass? Are we gonna celebrate your awesomeness with Princess Celestia? Not quite. We're going to the Crystal Empire. Huh?
Upon their arrival, Cadance provided a protection spell from Sombra, but has had no sleep at all. Because of this, there's little time to find information and restore balance to the kingdom. And with much trouble at hand, the Crystal Ponies have little to no memory of their past time, and especially since the curse and fear they're under from Sombra. They're under a massive depression. This then leads to the second musical number, which is my favorite so far for the premiere, Ballad of the Crystal Ponies. Successfully, the Crystal Ponies begin to remember, and every step of the way, they begin to spark more. Okay, where do I begin? The villain in this one barely even counts as a villain. We only see him as he begins to break loose and transform, but as he's recovering, he's only defeated with no real true form at the end. It would be really nice to see if there was more time to see how threatening he really was and extend the suitable limit to the viewers. It worked a lot in Canterlot Wedding, so I don't see why it shouldn't have been done here. The next issue I have is, why is Twilight being put to the test of this whole scenario when Celestia and Luna are sitting out and having their own royal sandwich and a show? At least in Return of Harmony, there was a legitimate and speculative reason for Celestia's absence. She was no longer capable of holding the elements of harmony as the main six did to stop discord. That to me is an exception. But here, not only is it relied specifically on Twilight just to provide protection on a giant city, which is very prescient by the way, but there is no mention of the elements of harmony. I mean, sure, Twilight's powerful and very proactive with her magic skills, but to challenge one pony over one big task is just, I don't know, I can't seem to buy that. Lastly, why the hell would you just banish Sombra to the Arctic North when really, you could just banish him to the moon like Luna? He has nowhere to go, he's got nothing to do, he's stuck there. Or better yet, turn him into stone like Discord. That would have saved a lot more trouble. Now, setting aside my nitpicking, there are plenty of things I enjoyed in this two-parter. By keeping the characters intact, the humor was top-notch. Rarity's reaction to the Crystal Empire by her fashion-obsessive fantasies was something I was expecting from a mile away. And Pinkie Pie dressed up as a spy was, as usual, completely random out of nowhere, especially her disguise as Fluttershy. Cadance being tossed by shining armor I thought was priceless, regardless of the scenario. The crystal culture was something I thought curious about more and more after I finished the episode. From what I thought was to be a typical love and hate setup, turns out to be something a little more in-depth than what I originally thought in most cartoons. Of course, the true form of the Crystal Ponies was visually fantastic to look at. The transparent bodies sparkling everywhere, and the hexagon-shaped light reflections on the pupils of their eyes. Part of what I enjoyed most was Twilight's obstacles into reaching the Crystal Heart. Going into stairways to gravitational slides was a trippy and fun experience, and I don't think I'll ever forget the scene where Twilight encountered the crystal spell that unleashed the visions of her worst fear.
Not only will you not move on to the next level of your studies, you won't continue your studies at all.
What do I do now?
Twilight! I know you told me to stay up there, but you were down here for such a long time and... What were you looking at? I mean, it's just a wall. Ponyville? Well, how did I get... No! I don't want to go! Please, Twilight, don't make me! We were home. You told me you didn't need me anymore. You were sending me away.
So instead of your typical scary monsters and arachnophobia scenarios, they show the darkest scenes in life that personally affects you. That to me is more powerful and more realistic. I felt heartbroken to what Twilight was seeing. As if seeing that in a candlelight wedding wasn't bad enough. Ugh, God forbid Paleo sees that dolphins are becoming extinct. To top it all off, Spike was made into a hero, and that for me was a change for the better. Spike was my least favorite character out of the main cast. He was either supportive or just plain dull. It seemed as though the writers couldn't make up the mind of what he's supposed to be referred to as. But here, he actually gets the heroic praise, which to me is a new step for him, and it's a new step that he can go for better on the staff. Now, while there were plenty of things I enjoyed about this premiere, it overall is the dullest compared to the rest. I certainly enjoyed it, but there was a lot of room for improvement. What could have made this better is mostly if the villain had more screen time and a chance to take over. As repetitive as it sounds, there was a lot of room to place a spot for him, especially when Twilight's going for the Crystal Heart. Let's say that while she's still getting it, Sombra's taken over the Crystal Empire, and Cadence is no longer conscious from her power, until at the very end, she can recast her spell. That would have been a hell of a lot better. We see the fear and wrath from Sombra while everything else is happening. But as I said, it was still enjoyable, and I hope that the rest of Season 3 still keeps at it. So until next time, this is GoldenFox. Take care. Pinkie Pie is the best pony. She just is. I'm sorry to take the words out of Pelea's mouth, but he speaks the truth. Her wild antics, fourth-wall jokes, and energetic personality is something you have to learn to appreciate for who she is. I will admit, I was not very fond of her at first, but trust me when I say how much I greatly underestimated her overall, which wasn't very long anyway. That also includes her character-driven episodes. So far, with the only one exception, every Pinkie Pie-centered episode has been outdone by the staff. They each have their own way of addressing Pinkie at what she does and what she strives for, and suffice it to say, her episode Too Many Pinkie Pies is another inclusion of my amusement, and that especially speaks a lot since this episode was written by Dave Polsky, who was responsible for the infamous Feeling Pinkie Keen. Pinkie Pie gets caught under a small dilemma where multiple things come into for her friends to the point where she has to choose to spend time with. With an idea taken wrongly by Twilight's words of advice, she finds a way to maintain her choices by going to a pond in the Everfree Forest, as told by her honest affiliate, called the Legend of the Miracle, where she can make a clone of herself. However, with the only one clone of herself to fill in her task, she doesn't succeed due to the distraction of Fluttershy's tea party.
Ooh, did you get ice cream? What kinds did they have? Banana prickle? I didn't make it! I was on my way there and then Fluttershy, yeah, her, she offered something else fun for me to do. A picnic with cute little animals. How could you say no to that? That's what I'm saying! Then I would have missed the super fun thing with applesauce. Applejack. No, I didn't do anything fun at all! Oh, my poor me. There. Tell me what, we just need a couple more Pinkie Pies. Easy peasy. Really? Come on, would I lie to me?
So Pinkie Pie makes more, but with the results for clones making way more duplicates than she needs to in the first place. Pinkie's fine with it at first until she discovers how rambunctious her clones really are as they run and stir up trouble around Ponyville, as problems for everyone including Pinkie herself begin to spiral out of control. Twilight tries to figure out the real Pinkie before ridding her clone so that way she won't mistake the real Pinkie Pie and send her back to the pond. But because of Pinkie's frustration with the mix-up, she falls under an identity crisis, making things difficult for Twilight. This I can't deny that the writers and Andrea Lemon seem to have way too much fun with. The idea behind multiple copies of Pinkie Pie is just what you expect it to be. Utterly chaotic, over the top, and of course, randomly hysterical. But as predictable as it was, I laughed and smiled non-stop throughout the whole episode. Pinkie has before spoken to herself in many ways, but the fact that she insists on taking a greater advantage of her own self several times over is just not just funny, but intriguing as she begins to learn more outside of herself.
Okay, between the bunch of us, we should have every nook and cranny of fun in Ponyville covered at all times. An unprecedented and massive undertaking. But first, a pop quiz on the names I taught you. Applejack. Fluttershy. Pinkie Pie. Excellent. Okay, let's get on with this, folks. Fan out on 3. 1.
Of course, discussing the humor can never be left out. Multiple shouts of fun from every clone bouncing throughout is just nothing more than just amusing, despite the chaotic scenarios. What also amuses me more is the various postures that I can recognize, including one I remember from A Friend Indeed. Pinkie's head ticking like an alarm clock was, of course, just her being Pinkie Pie. Random. But for some reason, some people find that creepy. To me, it was just an exaggerated way of her getting an epiphany. Adding a J3 reference was one I didn't expect at all. It was said that there was a showing of this on a preview on the Hub, but I never watched it. Again, I was able to tell the writers were having fun. If there's any concern I have, it's Pinkie's mix-up with the clones. The fact that she was the one who duplicated herself, saw her clones make more, and saw that Twilight was getting mixed up with the others, how could Pinkie get confused herself?
So let me guess. You're the real Pinkie Pie.
Heck if I know. Could be any one of us if you ask me. And if I said I was the real Pinkie, you wouldn't even believe me anyway. So just leave me alone. I've got some important poking the ground with my hoof to do.
And for that matter, how can Twilight not tell the difference when Pinkie herself is wallowed on a cafe table compared to other clones jumping around so frantically?
This is hopeless.
Maybe that one's the real Pinkie.
Please, the real Pinkie Pie never sat that long in one place her whole life.
I'm gonna go ask.
Of course she's gonna say she's the real Pinkie. They all do.
Twilight, maybe it's because Pinkie is very regretful of what trouble she's caused. Pinkie has doubted herself in the past and has even cried. It's not rocket science. That's as much as I can say about this episode. While it isn't the best Pinkie Pie-centered one, it was certainly not a letdown. Pinkie Pie is still Pinkie Pie, and she still learns from the experiences that she encounters. The importance of this episode was the fact that the overall reason behind this was Pinkie didn't want to choose. Having to make a choice over someone else can be pressuring when you have to value each and every one. It's not as common of a message when you think about it. You will eventually stumble upon making crucial decisions in life, and this episode did justice on the moral very well. Ending with this one, Pinkie takes a nap as something fun. Since I've been up behind my reviews and have been doing so much in life, I clearly don't blame her on this one. But until next time, this is GoldenFox, and take care. The Cutie Mark Crusaders can come off as a love them or hate them response from the audience, and it sometimes grows on you depending on what side you choose. At first I thought they would come off as annoying during the first season, especially with the shouting of their name in the Stairmaster. But as the series progresses on, they do learn and mature better, but are still frustrated getting their mark in society and remain outcast by every pony else. While formulas involving one different and mistreated are overdone, it's something I'm personally never tired of. So deep down inside, we all have this dilemma, and the CMC has this issue in the worst luck possible. In this episode, One Bad Apple, Applebloom's cousin Babseed moves into Ponyville from Manhattan to stay with the Apple family for a few weeks. Much like the Cutie Mark Crusaders, Babs also doesn't have a cutie mark, but as she's introduced to them in their clubhouse, Babs gets pressured by Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, and thus siding with them instead. In doing so, Babs trashes the CMC throughout most of the episode, to the point where the CMC decide to plan a large prank on Babs. Little do they know was the overall reason behind why Babs was sent here in the first place.
Well, I didn't say nothing because I didn't want her to feel singled out. But there's been some bullies back in Manhattan just been teasing her to pieces for her blank flank.
Teased? Bullies?
Yep. She came out to the farm to get away from all her problems back home. Oh, I'm so proud of y'all. You done a good deed.
So that's why she jumped in when Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon started giving us a hard time. She didn't want to be bullied like at home, so she decided to be a bully instead. And now we've turned into bullies too.
This episode isn't just about bullying, but the influence of bullying. Bullying has been constantly advertised in front of kids a lot, but this one actually does a much better job. The way the moral is displayed in this one is very universal and not so much as a bullying is bad scenario. Bullying happens due to many reasons, but specifically they wanted to take their problems out on others. What Babs was dealing with felt like a one-way option for her, since she didn't want to be bullied again. It's very reasonable on her shoulders. It wasn't her complete intentions to be mean and boastful. She was just scared and was hiding from it. Scenarios like this aren't explained very often. For how I feel about Babs alone, I like this character. There's not much of her seen, but I can feel a lot from her. I'm not sure if they'll make a return for her later in the series, but I hope they do, since now she can start her mark on the CMC Club in Manhattan. It's a good way to spread out word and handle these problems. Additionally, we have a song about Babseeds, which is called, well, Babseeds. While everyone else loved the song, I thought it was enjoyable, but not as much as everyone else. This song sounded way too mainstream for me, Pop rock or punk music is always something that I find too formulaic or just something too simple or no variation to the point where I just forget about it. This song did have some good variation in its music, but the style of the genre just doesn't pique my interest as well. I'm a person who loves and indulges rock and metal, especially the names of musical groups of classic rock. Now, I'm not saying that Bab Seeds is anything in what I just said. It's actually a very well composed song. To its credibility, Daniel Ingram tries to do many different styles in his musical numbers. Some are Broadway orchestrated, some are blended with other genres, and some are just songs of their very own. And admittedly, the animation is utterly fantastic as we see the adorable postures of the Cutie Mark Crusaders in different environments, as well as the chorus sequence. Already there's a milkshake meme. Let's just hope there's no There Will Be Blood reference involved. The only issue I had with this episode is that it seemed a little too one-sided. We see a lot happening with the CMC, but with so little time with Babs and where she hides her flank, it seemed like this episode was just favoring the CMC. Granted, it was just an attempt to build up to the character Babs, and it surprised us with her problems. But her just being a jerk throughout the episode seemed a bit like a surprise twist was placed at the last minute. It still took me and perhaps many others by surprise, but this episode could have been a little more balanced. The other thing to address is Babs' accent.
More like the Cutie Mark crybabies. Well, it was yours, and now it's mine. Looks like some pony's pumpkin just got squashed. Hey, that's not how you talk to my friends.
It's nice to consider the fact that other ponies can resemble different environmental and locational personalities, but her Eastern Mafia-ish accent seems to be all over the top fake, that it felt like it was too stereotyping. It also didn't help the character's personal feelings since it made her sound mean as she in the episode was, well, mean. Again, the episode was just too one-sided. While it is written by Cindy Morrow, who's my favorite writer of the show for Sisterhood Social and Hurricane Fluttershy, this isn't her strongest. But out of the season so far, it's one of the few episodes I enjoyed overall. It still tackles the message very well, and while there are some hiccups here and there, the story is pretty solid. Both this and Ponyville Confidential have been my favorite episodes that have centered on the Cutie Mark Crusaders, and it shows more development for each other. There's still more episodes to run down the line, and I hope they still live up to the good potential. So until next time, this is GoldenFox. Take care. Trixie's first appearance in Ghostbusters sparked much attention since the start of the fandom, and has grown through many different kinds of fan material, from art to fiction to animation and music, and strangely enough, she represented a major icon for Equestria Daily. I don't know what it is with Sathista's obsession with this character, because she's come all over the website frequently from the very start. Regardless, however, for how I feel about Trixie, I can understand the appeal of this character. She makes you hate her with a passion, as her intentions are a vulgar display of pride and egotism, to such high levels that not even Rainbow Dash would dare to take upon. And in short, she enjoys being who she is. That's really one of the big things that sparks an interest for a villain or an anti-hero, depending on how you picture the character. That's why even I, myself, enjoyed the despicableness of Trixie. Just not that much. And like Princess Luna, every pony was expecting her appearance in a later episode, and 2 seasons later, it has finally happened with a vengeance in Magic Duel. Upon returning to Ponyville, Trixie harasses Twilight's friends and a few of the other citizens with the addition of removing Pinkie's mouth, all until Twilight agrees to a duel. In addition, Trixie wears a necklace that she bought from the start of the episode called the Alicorn Amulet, which gives her magical abilities over Twilight. Because of Twilight's loss, Trixie exiles her from Ponyville and summons a glass shield all over the town to prevent Twilight's return and everybody else's escape. Add to this, Trixie enslaves and abuses the town as the main 6 try a way to get back at her. Meanwhile, Twilight seeks help with Sakura in the Everfree Forest to overcome Trixie with her overtaking schemes. The rest of the main 6 seek info in Twilight's library and discover the details about the Alicorn Amulet. While giving her special powers, it also corrupts her with more and more magical abilities, and thus being more aggressive as shown throughout the episode. What's worse, it's locked on her neck until she decides to take it off. Within escape attempts, Fluttershy gets sent out from Ponyville to tell Twilight the information in the forest, and thus fight back and trick Trixie to take it off. I'm going to be fully honest with you and say that I was very disappointed the first time I finished it. There were several things I hoped for this episode would have, and suffice it to say, my expectations were completely different. On the contrary, when watching it more and more, I felt intrigued, just to the point where I just felt underwhelmed and just disappointed. I think it's one of those episodes I like more and more when I watch it, but I could be wrong. I'll first go over my issues with it from the first time I watched it. Firstly, the duel scenes weren't really duel scenes. From what I was expecting to be more of a wizard's battle that could have been like Celestia against Chrysalis in a Canterlot wedding, turns out to be just a show-off performance with what Emma Larson put together by a way of magic spells until there was an aging spell that defeated Twilight. Especially since such build-up is involved, a rainy intro to a village, a ruthless appearance, and a serious overtone during her arrival and the dark tone of the episode, all just watered down to child's play. For a character like Trixie to finally return with such hatred towards Twilight, something's gotta give. Apparently I'm not bothered by it now than I was before, but I was hoping for something better than what was seen. My second issue was misusing Fluttershy for the humor in this episode. A good chunk of her was heavily teased, and while it did get a good laugh, the over-the-top panic attack she had just felt way off.
Oh dear, Rarity's dangerous mission outfit is ruined. Guess we better go back. Okay, you're right. I need to be brave and find Twilight. Oh, you found her? She's in the Everfree Forest? Oh, this is me being brave. I want to be brave at home, locked in my closet with my teddy bear.
See, earlier in the series, Fluttershy was overcoming that obstacle. Episodes like Hurricane Fluttershy were a prime example to her strugglings to gain self-confidence. And also, I should add, she was capable of standing up to herself, especially towards a cockatrice and a dragon for her friends. But here, she's not only rooted back to square one, but she was also made as just a coward. Naturally, when it comes to episodes written by M.A. Larson, he always intends to mix a good chunk of humor, but at the same time, he can really misuse it. Now, don't take me wrongly, though. I especially enjoyed the good laugh when Fluttershy was being dragged to the Everfree Forest by her woodland friends, but let's just make sure a continuity is still in place next time. And lastly, one minor problem. Trixie's apology at the end was rather thought up at the last minute. If the whole point of this episode was to have Trixie redeem herself, then a better approach would have Twilight talk to Trixie maturely and have a closure for their rivalry. With the climactic scene with Twilight's second duel, that was a perfect time. The point of this character was to just not show off pride. Apparently, I didn't see any acknowledgement the slightest bit of that, and it truly bugs me. It was such a huge lackluster of a message, and it was a perfect use to have Trixie be more aware of her self-centered attitude to achieve this moral. Aside from my nitpicking though, there were plenty of things I admired and which helped raise the stakes of this episode. Snips and Snails acknowledged the wrongfulness of Trixie as she enslaved them to where they even admired that she was a fraud. I didn't think about these characters too often, and I found them to be nothing more than moronic cardboard cutouts. But where credit is due, they actually develop. While a few references to Larson's other episodes were thrown in, it additionally shows that some things haven't been forgotten on the show. Pinkie by getting her mouth at the end, and even with Twilight breaking the fourth wall, was just brilliant. Pinkie was formerly known to provide fourth wall jokes, and it's nice to see other characters get involved with that. Though I have to ask, how was Pinkie able to breathe in this episode since she has no mouth or nose for air circulation? But what I loved the most was Sakura. Sakura is a zebra, or formerly what I see her as another earth pony. She has no horn to represent a unicorn, and yet she's capable of performing magic, which helps Twilight in the process. It's not just this episode, but in general about her. Even though she's represented as a mystical shaman, she offers a lot of support throughout the series by a way of breaking ground rules of what ponies are supposed to be only capable of. So while I was disappointed the first time I watched it, it's better off setting aside my expectations and seeing what the episode is really supposed to show us universally. Unfortunately, I want to like this episode, but I'm still underwhelmed with it. It's a good episode, but not a great one. Since now that Trixie's become a friend than a foe, or at least that's what the staff wants us to think, there will hopefully be more potential with this character than what we originally thought. But only time will tell since the rest of the episodes are still away. So until next time, this is GoldenFox, and wait, did you just trip? Oh, come on! For a long time, Scootaloo has been the most underplayed character from the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Ever since the beginning, there have been episodes that have centered on either Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, or the CMC as a whole, where Scootaloo was left in the shadows for her to be ridiculed by the fanbase, due to a line in an episode that compared her to a farm animal. Thankfully, after time has gone by, many bronies, including myself, have been begging for a Scootaloo-centered episode. Finally, we not only get this one, but also one of the most important aspects of her motivation. The new writer for this episode knows exactly what to give us, and boy does it live up to its potential.
Well, I have to say that it's about time Scootaloo had her own episode. Although, I was hoping that this episode would result into Scootaloo's background, like where she lived, who her parents are. But this episode was good. Who doesn't enjoy camping? I myself have done it a few times. The only thing I don't like about it is the packing and the unpacking multiple times. I feel so bad for Sweetie Belle in this episode.
In attempts to impress and spend time with Rainbow Dash, Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle decide to go on a camping trip with Apple Blue and her sister over the weekend. Each CMC has their companions, and Scootaloo has Dash as her sleeping buddy. Over the course of their travels, however, Scootaloo gets anxious and tries to hold in all her true feelings from anything she feels gets in her way to impress Dash. This makes things very hard for Scootaloo as Rainbow tells ghost stories. This, of course, frightens Scootaloo, but refuses to tell anyone about her fears overnight, and thus causing her to have a huge lack of sleep. Things get more problematic with Scootaloo the more she holds in her true feelings.
In my opinion, the best part of camping is telling stories around the campfire. Scary or non-scary, and it goes better when you have s'mores. Anyways, like most children, they can be scared of scary stories resulting fears that create monsters under the bed or the boogeyman in the closet. Scootaloo's fears seem to get the best of her, and the only one who notices is Applejack. I think Scootaloo could have gone to her, but she wanted to be tough like Rainbow Dash. In fact, I actually expected Rainbow Dash to notice Scootaloo's nervousness.
I never had the experience of camping, but I can say it is easy for a child to be scared of a ghost story, and it clearly shows with Scootaloo. The whole sceneries with her nightmare sequences are very convincing and pretty creative. I also love how they threw in the trees from the Giggle at the Ghosties for the surrealism, along with the subtle wave effects for the spooky atmosphere. It can really show you how you feel for Scootaloo when she intends to hide her fears for Dash. All the pressure, all the anxiousness she goes through until it leads up to her final confession.
I'm so sorry, Rainbow Dash. I just wanted you to hang out with me and see how cool I was so you'd take me under your wing, teach me everything you know, and become like my big sister. But then you started telling those spooky stories and I got scared. I thought I heard the headless horse, so I ran out here by myself and... well, I guess you know the rest. Hey, I'm gonna tell you something, but if you ever tell any pony else, I'm gonna deny it. First time I heard those stories, I was scared too. You were? Sure. I mean, I got over it because I realized pretty quick that if there was such thing as a headless horse, I could totally take it on. So, you're looking for some pony to take you under their wing, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might be up for something like that. Really? As long as you don't go falling into any more rivers in the middle of the night. It's a deal.
I really think what was great about this was that the teacher in this episode was Luna instead of Celestia. She teaches Scootaloo that fears are things to face and not run away from. Otherwise that fear grows and you'll always be afraid. What Scootaloo fears is her impressions with Rainbow Dash and not really the ghost stories. But there's still a natural sense to Scootaloo on the ghost stories that lead up to her true conflict.
As addressed before in the Crystal Empire, a fear that you stumble upon in life is more realistic than what is typically displayed in cartoons. It's an open chance to treat kids as adults and give them something more to think about, especially in their own lives and what issues they can relate to from reality in the cartoon. This episode takes a further depth into this direction, and I love that. I also love that Luna makes an appearance in the episode. We haven't seen her in a while, even with her screen time in the Crystal Empire. It's also interesting that we see that Luna is capable of diving into people's dreams to provide a lesson and ensure comfort. Just comes to show that she can teach just like Princess Celestia.
Speaking of Celestia, has anyone noticed she's not receiving any letters from ponies anymore? I hope she doesn't banish anyone to the moon.
Yeah, it's strange that the more recent episodes have had a lack of moral narration, but I guess you can establish that there are other ways to learn lessons from the show instead of morally addressing the subject. But that doesn't subdue anything best here. This episode has been the most touching and emotionally engaging behind Scootaloo, especially for a first on her. It establishes her prime motivation with what she's been striving for, and I hope to see more of her at this point.
I actually hope to see an episode that would center on her family or relatives. We see ones with Sweetie Belle and Apple Bloom, but not Scootaloo. In fact, we never heard any family mentions of the other Pegasus ponies. Scootaloo, Rainbow Dash, and even Fluttershy. We never hear relatives from them. Where did they come from?
Well, this isn't the first time that was brought up, but I hope for more answers on that and more Scootaloo soon. But until next time, this is GoldenFox.
And I'm My Tokyo Kitty.
And thank you for listening.
Hey, wanna make s'mores?
We could if we had some more chocolate.
I was hungry.
Rainbow Dash is a Sonic the Hedgehog of the My Little Pony franchise, having a sporty personality with the speed and abilities, not to mention she's blue, aside from the rainbow mane and tail, and at the same time she remains loyal to her companions, even in little shorts where she can put aside her giant ego.
All my friends are the best. Next question.
But the biggest motivation behind Rainbow Dash was to be a part of the Wonderbolts, a military/Blue Angels-esque fleet of professional Pegasi that take on the sky with no limits. Ever since the start of the series, Rainbow Dash has been speaking non-stop about them, and has even had fan reactions, and has even saved their lives in a tough situation. Finally, after a long run of the series, Dash finally gets the dream of her life as she's invited into being the Wonderbolts Academy with the sub-Top Gun story. Upon arriving, Dash immediately goes into training by Spitfire, the leader of the group. She along the way gets competed with another Pegasus pony named Lightning Dust, as she intends to challenge herself much like Dash in order to impress Spitfire a lot. Unfortunately, while Dust gets along with Dash very well, she gets so competitive to the point where Dash feels limited in her challenges. Because of this, Dash gets ranked as a co-pilot or as a wing pony in their universe. But she still progresses on herself, but Lightning gets so aggressive throughout the obstacles and thus stirring up trouble with the other trainees and almost costing Dash's friends at one point. Dash is of course not amused, especially since Spitfire is not fully aware of the scenario.
You're supposed to be up there busting clouds with your partner.
We're done with that, ma'am.
Already? That's an Academy record. Explain your methods.
That's why I'm here, ma'am. Lightning Dust decided to use a tornado.
A bit excessive for cloud busting, but judging from your time, it was obviously an effective tactic.
Yeah, well, that effective tactic nearly took out my friends. No disrespect, ma'am, but there's a big difference between pushing yourself as hard as you can and just being reckless. And if being reckless is what gets rewarded around here, if that's what it means to be a Wonderbolt, then I don't want any part of it.
While the story is admittedly formulated, it breaks away from a few cliches that I was predicting. I thought that Dash was going to get more competitive with Lightning and make the same mistakes Lightning made in the episode, and have much more of a big ego and thus lose her reputation with her friends. I also thought Lightning was going to be the superior lecture one where she teaches Dash the mistakes she's made, much like Iceman for Maverick. But here, the tables have turned, and it fits much better since Dash is supposed to be known for her loyalty as it is, especially throughout the series, which she learned a lot about her ego towards her friends. I also love how speculative the moral is, even though there was no letter to Celestia. It isn't just about being competitive, or how exploitations can lead to a reckless direction. It's also about teamwork, which could have been the main message as well, but it was respectfully underplayed. Another thing that amuses me is that the training grounds here are made into spectacular effect. There's of course your typical laps and exercise and reps that capture the flag, but there's also a specialized catapult that makes you dizzy before takeoff that's used to surpass any vision or conditional issues that you could face, especially in the worst scenarios. The weather controlling methods are also utilized here for training ground purposes other than just using it for weather for any basic needs. This is one I find Pegasi in the show and more admirable. Their advantage of controlling the weather for certain needs of civilizations for ponies on Earth or unicorn ponies, as shown in Lurk Before You Sleep, Winter Wrap-Up, and Hurricane Fluttershy. And I especially love it when the use of her alternative methods, such as this one. It's a lot more believable than just tossing it aside for a kid show. I should also mention that there were other characters from Hurricane Fluttershy that are placed in this one, and I love that. Cloud Chaser, Thunderlane, and of course, Snowflake. Yeah! So instead of using the old background characters, they mix in a variety here. Though the one minor question that crossed my mind was why Spitfire didn't seem to recognize Dash, especially when she was saved in the Sonic Rainboom and was impressed in Hurricane Fluttershy. There was no mention of these whatsoever, and maybe there could have been a subtle connection with her and Dash. Not in the sense where she could give Dash some special advice to be mentioned or something that could have came together. Another issue to address is Lightning's character. She's more of the negative part of Dash, and while it can establish a bipolar opposite, she's more of the same character with Dash. There can be competitive personalities, don't get me wrong. She carries her fun moments, but she overall could have had something a little more dynamic than just be the opposite of Dash. I guess the later episodes can follow that up. And this may seem too nitpicky, but I also don't see how Dash was able to catch the main six on a cloud at the end of the episode. It was addressed in Sonic Rainbow that only Pegasus ponies are capable of walking on clouds unless granted a spell that allows you to walk on. I would guess that Twilight may have started that in advance, but there could have been at least some screen time for that. I also found the scenes with Pinkie Pie's obsessive concern for Dash to be a little underspirited. I love the idea that she cares for Dash, but her waiting for a response through a mailbox was just too much. To its credibility, it does contain continuity, since Pinkie intends to care for others. Out of all the episodes, Meriwether Williams wrote, "This one to me is her very best. She definitely made a step up after her failed episode being the Mysterious Mare Duel. Is it a perfect episode? Is it considered the best episode of Season 3? No. but I loved this episode a lot. It's my favorite episode so far, and it is different compared to what's considered the best. It's very flawed, but you get the point. We get to see the training grounds of the Wonderbolts, what the course is, and a satisfying message on sportsmanship. So now that Dash has been a part of the training grounds, only time can tell of when she will be a part of the Wonderbolts, the leader of the Wonderbolts, and for that direction, what other grounds and obstacles will she face? Is she going to be more geared towards the Wonderbolts, or have the luxury of being with the main six again? It's a huge and exciting stepping stone in the series now. But until next time, this is GoldenFox, and take care. Before going over this episode, I want to first talk about a small little nod that was winked at the end, which was addressed by Sibsy on Twitter. There were two scenes where a pair of shooting stars in the sky were taking place, resembling Applejack's parents. For how I feel about this being a nod is kind of what I wasn't expecting. I was actually hoping to hear information about Applejack's family as an entire episode than just a subtle nod when I heard about the plot. She has a big family, and there's a lot of potential to what could lure into this topic. She already was a developed character who was later tossed in the background for a while without any further detail given. Thanks to Galaxy R for readdressing that. There was even talk that we'd expect an episode like this, such as her looking for a lost hat, and maybe her hat could resemble something to do with her parents. This was briefly mentioned by Saberspark in a livestream discussion regarding our expectations, but that still hasn't been established, and I don't know if that'll ever happen. It's really left up to the writers on this part, of course. So as I review this episode, I will try not to compare this episode to my expectations like I did with Magic Duel. Apple Family Reunion is just what you expect it to be. It's the most literal title since Too Many Pinkie Pies. On a special occasion, the Apple families from various regions of Equestria gather together in a large outside party for all kinds of games and activities. On this occasion, though, Applejack takes over the plans and setting everything up instead of Granny Smith, since she was the one originally responsible in her past lifetime. But with such a large crowd on her hooves, Applejack overdoes the task when assembling the party grounds and having the games and activities becoming so extreme it makes every pony uncomfortable from having any fun.
Wow, is that the finish line? It's like a mile away or something.
Actually, that's just the marker where you go on to the next leg of the race.
There's more?
Much more. Trust me, I have put together something you are never gonna forget. After the seven-legged race, you're gonna want to hurry up and head over here, where you'll be bobbing for apples. Then you'll run around these trees 50 times until you're real good and dizzy. Then you'll jump these big wooden hurdles. And then there's the final leg, where you'll balance plates on your head while saying, Tappy Pony picked a pluck of pickly pluck nuggets over and over and over again. The last pony standing wins.
Seriously?
Seriously.
And that's as little detail as I can give on the plot. And this is also the biggest issue I have with the episode. It's too short, formulaic, little to no conflict, and it suffers massively from several predictabilities. I normally don't like to gripe or criticize on what's unoriginal and predictable because these kinds of flaws are very inevitable no matter what you write. You can always alter your roots and make it effective still on the audience. But nothing special was ever established here other than there's a special barbecue get-together with memories. Now that's not a problem itself. A slice of life episode is entertaining, but again, there's just very little conflict. Something could have been added more, such as a possible hidden rivalry between Granny Smith and Applesauce. There was mention that her teeth fell into a pot of apple jams, and Granny Smith could have been the cause. I also would have loved to have seen more of Apple Bloom trying to avoid Applejack because of the extreme games that she was given. This was something that could have been made more into this episode in regards to its moral, since it's about the importance of family memories. I also didn't like that Applejack was being unaware of every pony's discomfort on what's going on. There could have been more screen time where she'd get worried or over-concerned of what could have gotten the best of her, but here, she's just oblivious. Putting aside the story's shortcomings, there's plenty of things I enjoyed in this episode. On the one hand, we get to see Babseeds again, and that's really nice for a continuity nod right there, especially considering that this is from the same writer. Even though there's little screen time between her and Apple Bloom, we see that she's succeeding with her own club of the Cutie Mark Crusaders. It's definitely what I was expecting out of in return. Additionally, we get to see Applejack as a baby.
Hey, where did all them apple fritters go? And who are you, little one?
I'm Applejack. Small apple fritter.
Oh great, now I'm diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. The humor in this episode was also pretty good by minor mentions of past times. Spike being used as a lighter, Granny pulling her skin away and making herself look young again for a short time was pretty clever. And perhaps the best part of the episode was the ending musical number, Raise This Barn. For once, we actually get a song for Applejack, and it's up to this point that we never had a song before until now. And in short, I found it definitely worth the wait. I've seen this sequence multiple times now, and it still holds up pretty well. It's simple, catchy, and just a lot of fun to watch. The animation works really well with the country folk-style music, and many different kinds of western dances that are involved. I also can't forget the shot where that one pony's fiddling with a violin. Sounds like Octavia's got a competitor. I hope that sooner or later we'll learn about Applejack's parents. If the writers can tell us by hint, then sure enough it should happen later in this season or the next. We've seen a lot of parental characters with the only exception of Applejack and the Pegasi, but that's beyond the point. As for this episode, this is not only what I find to be Cindy Marl's weakest episode, but also this season. I'm sorry, Sydney, you're my favorite writer, but this is where you have your own downs. It's thankfully the only one as far as the season goes, and it can still stand up as well because there have been a lot of enjoyable moments as mentioned before, and the overall atmosphere of family meetups. So while I find this to be a dull episode just out of the main story, it's most certainly rewatchable. But until next time, to the staff, quit teasing us. Okay, let's clarify something about Spike, because what I was saying about him led to misleading feedback. Out of the main cast, Spike is my least favorite character. Is he a bad character? Absolutely not. He's very likable, and he represents an icon that can hold an interest to an audience that admires dragons, even if they're cute. A part of my issue with Spike is identifying his personality. He's remotely undefined. At times he's supportive, but at other times he doesn't cooperate, and he even puts other characters into ridicule, which thereby distinguishes his personality. Granted, some of the main six have broken out of character before, but at least it was for a short time. The constant changing nature in Spike throughout the entire series drifts me away. The most ironic thing about this is that this is what everyone loves about Spike. There's still potential that can make my perspective more open to him. One such episode came close though, being Dragon Quest, but the only result was that teenage dragons are just nothing more than assholes. Such older dragons can be clever and wise, and I'd like to see that. I want to like Spike more. If only he had more episodes on him instead of just using him as a side character. This is one of them. Spike at Your Service is both a Spike and an Applejack episode. Coincidentally, these two characters are what need to be developed the most, or at least given something enjoyable out of Slice of Life. Skeptical I was, since both Dave Polsky and Meriwether Williams wrote this episode, I wasn't sure what to expect. I watched it a few times more just to be sure, and in short, I really like it. After encountering some Timberwolves in the Everfree Forest, Spike gets his life spared by the help of Applejack. Because of this, and under a Dragon Code policy, Spike owes Applejack his debt by a lifetime spent as a servant over Twilight. Of course though, Applejack's not very comfortable about it since it makes her feel guilty, so she tries to lure Spike off her hooves. Once again, this is as little detail as I can give it, but unlike the Apple family reunion, there's conflict involved, and it intertwines between both Spike and Applejack, and very naturally so. The two of them are very much intact without losing the focus by the story's sake. Applejack's aware of the situation, and you can understand her discomfort, which works because she likes laboring independently. And while Spike's unaware of Applejack's level of guilt, you can understand his passion in following the Dragon Code. One of the big surprises to me, though, was the animation. Of course, as usual, there's always a good sense of improvement, but the real stickout was the inclusion of computer animation used for the Timberwolves. I can tell how challenging it must have been, animating each piece since they were able to reform together. Not to mention how blending the models in the cartoon were so effective. Not only was the computer animation a good usage, but it wasn't abused. Most medias nowadays abuse CGI, especially in movies. Here, this is when it's done properly. For future episodes, I hope to see it kept that way. The best part of the episode, however, was the humor. I normally don't go talking about humor all that much because I'm more focused on the story. But what's done here got me laughing good at a lot of scenes. The jump cut transition to Spike baking pies, his clumsy moments, and the constant pleading to Applejack, Pinkie Pie's villain mustache, the distraction to Twilight due to her studies, and so much more. And of course, the small rock that defeats the giant Timberwolf. This was pretty much the funniest of them all. Aside from the clever gag of how the littlest things can get you, the wolf going all, wait, hold on, got me laughing even harder. Though having the creature killed off, especially laughing about it, was pretty dark. Funny how this was able to slip in, and yet a mention of death of Applejack's parents are not. Hasbro, I don't know what it is with you and your policies of what's appropriate for kids or not, but... Okay, I'll shut my mouth up. Though the one big thing I hear from everyone else is seeing how clumsy Spike is on most tasks during the episode, and yet he does very well with Twilight. Viewers have griped about this one a lot, saying it throws him out of character. Honestly, I'm willing to make this one an exception. I have seen scenarios where he has screwed up under Twilight's commands in the past, and he has done well with Applejack with cleaning the pig, counting the blades on the grass on the farm, and stacking up all the rocks for Rainbow Dash. Not to mention the environment he's in is pretty different, even with his experiences of what he's had that are applicable. And at most, Spike was given a lot of simple tasks from Twilight compared to what was going on with Applejack. You could say that she could have at least taught a few things with Spike, but that would have also diminished the moral overall. While this episode didn't take the series any further and was a slice of life episode, I'm fine with that. From what I've seen throughout the season, there have been a lot of episodes that have pushed the characters forward, and filler or slice of life episodes are genuinely a good way to slow down the series. So even though I'm still expecting answers in the future, I can wait it off, instead of just having everything to be answered at once. I overall think this episode was pretty solid. It isn't perfect, but it's a step up for both Applejack and Spike. This episode sticks to the roots of the characters and provides some pretty good humor. I won't say too much more because I don't want to repeat myself. Apparently the next episode is delayed until the 19th, and the staff is on a break. They sure as hey need one, and I could use one. So, until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I look forward to the next episode, which is about... Fluttershy redeems Discord. Holy motherfucker! Yeah, as soon as this episode's synopsis was announced, every pony, myself included, were nuts about it. Unfortunately, while I was very interested, everyone else who I spoke to were not very pleased about it. I received a few Skype messages as well as an inbox on DeviantArt regarding this. I usually don't intend to be this immature, but I couldn't believe what they were saying. How could the staff change Discord into a good guy? He was the biggest, badliest villain of the show. We wanted to see him as a recurring villain. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, guys, you seriously need to mellow the fuck out. Discord was not that threatening! There, I said it. Now allow me to recap the show's overall villainy. Nightmare Moon took over Equestria as Eternal Night on behalf of Luna's jealousy over Princess Celestia and intended to use magical illusions to have a great advantage on the main six. King Sombra, despite his lack of screen time and trying way too hard to be Sauron from Lord of the Rings, placed the Crystal Ponies under a Great Depression as their slaves and even put Twilight under a traumatizing illusion. Tell me that's not diabolical. Trixie took over Ponyville with dictatorship, harassing the hell out of everyone else in the most mean-spirited way possible if things didn't go her way. And Queen Chrysalis, my god, Queen Chrysalis took over Canterlot to consume everyone's love with an insect infestation and trap the princess in a cocoon made out of their sticky green spit. All Discord did was place Ponyville in a very goofy and unpleasant environment with the psychological advantage of the main six through hypnosis, just so that he can have his fun. He didn't threaten anyone, he didn't hurt anyone, he didn't kill anyone. Discord was just a dickhead. I will admit that my expectations were too high sometimes throughout the series, but I take it for what it is, just like all of you should. So as the title says it, keep calm and flutter on. As we begin, Twilight, Dash, Rarity, and Pinkie await outside of Ponyville for Princess Celestia's arrival, with the inclusion of Discord as he's remained stoned. Celestia wants Discord reformed for the control of his magic, and additionally leaves it up to Fluttershy, hence the title.
I realize that this is a tall order, but I wouldn't ask if I weren't confident you could get him to use magic obediently of his own free will.
And you really think I'll know best how to do that?
I do.
For any cautions, the main six are given the elements of harmony in case anything goes wrong, and has even placed them under a protection spell so that way he won't steal them again. As ordered, Discord is set loose, and chooses to live with Fluttershy. And as it shows, she sticks with him and puts up with all the disadvantages Discord makes out of her. The rest of the main six are uncomfortable with them and keeps on guard with their elements of harmony, and sure enough, I don't blame them. Throughout the episode, Discord continues his mischiefs but grows a minor connection with Fluttershy. This then takes the episode and places it in a direction for Discord's underestimated grounds at the very end. For once he had a friend, and when losing Fluttershy, it's what he wanted. It's hard to believe at first considering how resentful he was with the term friendship in the past, but the relationship between him and Fluttershy shows a great distinction, and that he realizes the importance of friendship that he didn't know about. In a subtle way, he's given chances to do whatever he wants to do, and thus he begins to understand and appreciate Fluttershy's courtesy. What goes on with Fluttershy is unnerving in the sense where you understand the discomfort she's dealing with. You can sense the risk she takes and stands up to her friends while dealing with, okay, you get the point. The humor in this episode was definitely top-notch. I was laughing hysterically throughout. Not to mention, I found some of the scenes to be pretty creative. The spinning of Fluttershy's cottage, the dinner scene with the big reference to Be Our Guest from Beauty and the Beast, with all those dancing candles and dishes.
Not the dress! Not the dress!
And even a small fourth wall joke that Discord improvised when disrupting the beavers. I also found the harassment with Angel Bunny and the taking of his spot on the couch to be rather justified, especially considering how harsh he was with Fluttershy and putting your hoof down.
You like carrots, Angel? I'm playing your owner for a fool. How do you like them carrots?
Discord in general still sticks with his roots by doing this, and it clearly shows. John DeLancey can have too much fun when voicing this character. As far as this whole concept goes, I thought this turned out better than what most people made it out to be. But thinking back further, was redeeming Discord a good idea to begin with? Did I like the idea before watching the episode? Yeah, I actually think so. Why? Well, what else is he gonna do? Take over Ponyville again with chaos like he did last time, or try to take over all of Equestria like it did before? Besides, there's been some hilarious comics done by Mickey Monster on DeviantArt where he tickled the ponies. You should definitely check them out and you'll see what I mean. So really guys, give it a rest. I've seen more threatening villains other than Discord. They don't call it friendship is magic for nothing. And I won't be surprised if many of the other villains are going to be redeemed as well, whether it's Queen Chrysalis or Sombra, I don't know. So now that Discord's been turned towards being a protagonist, it's only a matter of time until we see him again, and what he'll be doing throughout the series. But until next time, this is GoldenFox, and we'll just have to wait and see. Yes, you guessed it correctly, I hated this episode. I actually feel pretty guilty saying that and giving a negative review for once. Whenever I reviewed something that didn't hold up to my expectations, I intend to give as much credit as I could and ferret out the results. Unfortunately, that's not much to say on behalf of the sheer mean-spirited, stupid, and moronic script of this episode. Sounds harsh, I know, especially given that this was from the same writer who did Sleepless and Ponyville. Like I said, I feel pretty guilty. But let's not stall any longer. We begin with Spike putting together a cake with a recipe where he adds jewels to the mix. Unfortunately, while getting too carried away, he blindly indulges the whole bucket of jewels and stumbles upon a missing ingredient. Coincidentally, Fluttershy pays a visit and offers Spike a task of keeping an eye on her pet, Angel Bunny, as she plans to go with the rest of the main six to the Crystal Empire. In condition, he's given a jewel. However, Spike uses the same idea by talking to the other main six, where he'll take care of the pets with the condition of paying him a jewel. As soon as he's on his own, the pets are beyond Spike's handling and everything spirals out of control. In the process, Angel ditches Spike and thus Spike has to find him. This then leads to various obstacles that cost him all the jewels that he was given just to take care of the animals in the first place. And that also dips the quality of the episode. Okay, I'm just gonna get right on it. First of all, why does Spike intend to be so secretive in setting up the animals for the main six in the first place? It's true that he directly tells them about keeping an eye on the pets while getting his jewelry salary as a condition, but at the same time, I didn't see what was wrong with just explaining that he wanted to put together his cake recipe. Strangely enough, Twilight's actually aware of this as it's shown at the end, and yet she acts suspicious when she was told about having Aloysius being taken care of with the addition of for his income. For anything else, Rarity could have used her magic to help Spike get more jewels, especially given how much of a connection he has with her. And thus, this could have saved the whole episode to begin with. Almost everything Spike does is irrational and not very thoughtful. His motivation isn't very selfish when you think about it, but the episode tries to make him out to be selfish, and it just doesn't work. Either way, he's not very rootable in this episode. Then there's Angel. I fucking hate Angel. I'll not go far too off topic, but to the obvious, he's such a spoiled little shit. One of the most unforgivable scenarios is what he did in Putting Your Hoof Down. In that episode, he straight up slaps Fluttershy in the face because he wanted a special salad recipe that looks too complicated for her to handle. And after getting forced to shop for ingredients and getting pushed and shoved by the public, she gets kicked out of her own house from that little rabbit because of one missing cherry. He on top of that gets away with it. Prior to that episode, he was just arrogant and annoyed by some of Fluttershy's lack of awareness, which is very disrespectful. What goes on in Just for Sidekicks doesn't make the character any better, and in fact just makes things difficult for Spike for no apparent reason. Additionally, what goes on around Spike becomes so backstabbing by many of the following ponies: Apple Bloom, the train conductor at the station, Granny Smith, and even Sakura. We have a scene where he's bound to a tree by all the pet leashes and Sakura insists on helping him, or so to speak. But with the cost of a jewel, she just straight up donates it to charity. She may have thought about doing the right thing, but what helped out Spike was nothing. A user named Digibrony, who I recommend checking out by the way, speculates that dragons can grow from greed, hence secret of my excess. She thought maybe she could prevent this from Spike from growing and causing havoc again. Except what Spike was doing wasn't very selfish at all. He made a deal to take care of the pets while getting paid a small salary for it. How the hell is that selfish or greedy? I should also point out that jewels are also dragon food in the show, especially since Sakura lives in the Everfree Forest where a dragon appeared in an episode. Sakura should know about it, as well as every pony else. Instead, she just stabs him in the back and just takes off with no problem to resolve. This is the first time I've had distaste on Sakura ever, and she's one of my favorite side characters, so that's really bad for me to say. I should also address that even though Spike had to learn about making deals and offers, all the mishaps he's dealing with and costing him all the jewels thanks to that little shit is just messed up. It's like that running gag where Rainbow Dash was trying to get a mug of cider in Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000. But she misses one where she's up front of line and wastes money off of it. It tries to be funny, but it's not. It's just mean-spirited. And at the end of the episode, out of Angel's expense, Spike puts up with all the supposed humility when he said he was in it for the jewels and not for the pets.
Go ahead, Bunny. Do your worst. I deserve it. I ignored you, tried to pawn you off on someone else. I didn't take these silly things out, or fluff this like I was supposed to. I wasn't really thinking about you at all. Any of you. Just wanted the jewels.
Spike actually was trying to take care of the pets, except they were out of control and thus having the CMC take care of them. And while prepping for the ingredients again at one point for his cake, he had to stop immediately to check back to ensure the pet's conditions.
Has anyone seen Tank's head? Where's his head?
What have you done to the turtle?
Oh, I totally forgot he could do that.
As soon as the episode nears to the credits, he eats the last jewel of his uncontrolled craving. And this overall is the reason why we were watching the episode in the first place. It's like Dexter's Laboratory, where problems are worsened for Dexter. He gets in trouble, he gets grounded for it, and the episode ends with no proper resolution. That's what this episode was. This was a messy, contrived, and abysmal episode to no end. No proper moral was given, nothing is resolved, Spike was being irrational with no rootable feel, even with good motivations, and that little fucking shit does nothing but lure Spike into uncalled for mishaps, and even get Spike and the CMC dragged to the Crystal Empire and all the way back. Seriously? Okay, now to provide constructive criticism for the writer Corey Powell, who also wrote Sleepless and Ponyville, here's what would have worked better. While Spike agrees to take care of the pets, he focuses too much on the cake and he mistreats them. This then leads to the pets getting back to him, including Angel, and he then realizes he was being too selfish and thus spilled the beans like it was shown in the episode. While it does work in the same plot for Baby Cakes and Stairmaster, this would have turned the whole perspective around, especially considering that Spike had issues with Angel earlier in the series. That would have been a better plot than what I just sat through. Now I'm going to set aside all the issues with this episode and give credit where credit is due. It's nice to see the pets once again, especially with Tank and Rainbow trying to show good gratitude and care for him, even with all the ridicule that she faces. The other pets weren't as problematic, even with Opal and her destructive attempts earlier. All the pets were also aware of Angel and his brattish attempts that were against Spike. There were a few good chuckles, and additionally, while the trip to the Crystal Empire was a completely pointless gesture, it's nice to actually see it again and even mentioned. But that's yet to be said for the next episode, Games Ponies Play. But I'm getting too ahead of myself here, and I'm sure the next 2 episodes should be a lot better than this one. I want to go back to the previous episode I reviewed for a bit, which was just for Sidekicks. Upon receiving feedback, I was told a few things in which were obvious, but at the same time, I felt I wasn't clear enough on. To begin with, it was said that Spike wasn't caring for the pets and he didn't treat them like he was supposed to, and even ignored them. He was just in it for the gems. The scene that almost shows that was when he was manipulating the Cutie Mark Crusaders to get the pets off his shoulders so that he can get back to his cake. I admittedly glossed over this because the rest of the episode overwhelmed me, so I forgot about it. So for everyone else's view on Spike, fair enough. But additionally, Angel was along with Spike for the ordeal, and he wanted to stay with the CMC as well, so he too was in it for the worst. And when Spike had to check back when hearing about Scootaloo on Tank's head, he realized the CMC can't treat them well, and thus he had to take them back. This pretty much shows that he does have concern and not mistreat them as I was told, and even though he was just in it for the gems, he nevertheless did the right thing by taking the pets back. And yes, there was also a scene where they were all wrapped up in a ball, but that was just to get them under control given how much aggravation Spike's been under. With the regard of Angel, I can understand the appeal from the other viewers on behalf of him as a brat, and thus betraying him the opposite of his name for the ironic joke. But look, I don't mind his personality that much, but I do mind if his personality starts the story or shifts the direction on a continuing episode. If Angel had not ditched Spike in the first place, there would have been a better connection between him and Spike, and the rest of the episode would have just kept the place in the library instead of just going on a scavenger hunt all over Ponyville, which was the most unnecessary plot direction in the whole episode. So I have to ask, why was it written that way? Well, upon watching the next episode, Games Ponies Play, oh, so they're making these 2 episodes parallel to what happens to the main 6 at the same time period. Why? As entertaining as this concept is, what's the point of it here? Something like this could have been used for a finale or a special occasion that's involved. This doesn't add anything special here at all. If anything, this is potential that's completely wasted. But does that deteriorate the next quality of this episode? Absolutely not. So let's just jump right in. So, while Spike's dealing with the pets, the Crystal Empire is put to a test by an inspector to decide whether or not the Empire will be able to host the equestrian games. The main 6, as they're involved, are to attend and impress the inspector at all times. Meeting up with Cadence at a grooming spa, they're told some traditions that must be followed. But unfortunately, due to an absence of a stylist who caught a flu, Rarity volunteers to suit up Cadence in a hairdress, as one of the following traditions that are followed. Additionally, the inspector arrives much sooner than expected, which leaves the main 5 remaining to aid her visit and leave a good impression. As written on a note, it is said that the inspector's luggage is printed with a flower pattern design, which is supposed to help Twilight find her. But since they were in a rush, there wasn't enough time to read it, so she decides to ditch it. What's worse is that thinking they found her, they mistaken a random visitor due to a very similar luggage design for the real inspector, as she is left behind with an aggravating time. You can pretty much guess what happens during the rest of the episode. It's that predictable. My original expectations was to actually see the games. That was something I was hoping for, such as the jousting or perhaps some flight competitions such as the Wonderbolts race. There's so much potential that could have exploited creative attributes such as the Sport Olympics. But alas, that wasn't the case. My expectations aren't the problem here though, that's just a personal preference. The real problem was the story. It was incoherent, very predictable to every ounce of boredom. It was so thin, nothing was interesting, nothing was compelling, and yet not even the humor, as good as it was able to save it. Firstly, I don't see how the main 5 would be this clueless upon seeing the visitor that they mistaken the inspector for. I mean, just alone by her optimistic attitude, thick southern accent, and the chicken for a cutie mark, not once are they remotely skeptical in identifying her. Inspectors and critics are supposed to take their role seriously. I know that the note said that her luggage had a flower design, but I'm pretty sure there was much more detail than that. And I know that Twilight was in a hurry, thus she couldn't read the whole thing clearly. But she should have just taken it with and read it along the way. Instead, she just leaves it behind. That right there is a red flag. And nearing to the end of the episode, when the real inspector is found, she talks to Cadence at the grooming spa, ranting about her unfortunate issues during her arrival. All of a sudden, after the beans are spilled by Dash, she voices her professional opinion after listening to the pony everyone mistaken for.
Not so fast, Speedy. I just finished hearing about how this pony was just treated to the warmest, funnest, most fabulous reception she ever had. Darn tootin', courtesy of these fine ponies right here. Which, in my expert opinion, amounts to the first ever unvarnished, unrehearsed, and unbiased appraisal of a potential host of the Equestria Games. Which can only mean one thing.
You know what would have actually made this scene better? Give the inspector a tour through the kingdom and make up for the lost cause. Provide her comfort and perform your deeds. I mean, wow, after all the agony she's had to deal with, she just blindly accepts it? Honestly, she deserves better. How does she even know how good it is and what could impress her? The visitor is just easily amused by everything. The inspector is to not just analyze, but experience a good welcome. But nope, she just jumps the shark and lets the Crystal Empire win. I know we wanted the city to win, and there's a lot that can be admired for it, but nothing here feels justified. Now, unlike Just for Sidekicks, where almost every minute was mean-spirited to no end, Games Ponies Play had a much lighter and more positive attitude. The atmosphere was also a lot more wide open, and not so much a shot so close. Character-wise, they all seem likable and well interacted, including the inspector. The visitor can sometimes be regarded as brainless, but honestly, I just found her unaware of everything. Most of her moments were a big meh, but still likable. Rarity's progress in Cadence's hairdress was pretty hilarious, though unfortunately it was just too underplayed. The main 5's cheerleading performance was a great take and highly energetic, something I wanted to watch more of. In fact, I have watched more of it several times.
2, 4, 6, 8. Name a place that's really great. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keeps you coming back for more. 2, 7, 9, 3. The place that we all wanna see. 4, 3, 2, 1. The Crystal Empire, that's the one.
Though at times I would have loved to have seen this used for something more, such as the actual games. But again, that's just me. The humor was a hit and miss, but mostly a hit, most of which are just cartoon slapstick, which only a few chuckles I got out of. But the big ones I enjoyed are Dash's concerns for the cities winning for the hosting. Additionally, we see a hint of Dash's parents along the way, so ha! There are Pegasi parents. And of course, as usual, Pinkie Pie's just being Pinkie Pie. But given that this and Just for Sidekicks have left me feeling empty, this parallel pair just feels so cluttered and rushed, and it's really disappointing that a concept like this was put to utter waste. I mean, again, what was the point? Something like this could have been used for a two-parter or at least a better script. Now, to be fair, if I had to choose between these two episodes in which I would rather watch again, I'd stick with Games Ponies Play due to its cheery level that I felt out of it. Outside of the show, the fandom has been dealing with several unfortunate events. It's been a really depressing couple of weeks, but since we're narrowing down to the season finale, I hope this help brings us out of the slump we're in. Magical Mystery Cure opens immediately with the musical number as the scene portrays closely to the opening sequence from Beating the Beast. Ponyville is extremely active, providing much optimistic atmosphere until it gets interrupted when Twilight gets splashed on by Rarity with a rain cloud. Starting with her as Dash's cutie mark, it's at this point that the episode has the main six and their cutie marks mixed up to one another, and their talented counterparts are a trouble to the town with no end. Twilight heads back to the library and remembers how it all started. Turns out the night before, when the mistake occurred, Twilight accidentally unleashed a spell from Star's world as it wasn't finished, thus actively disrupting the elements of harmony. Throughout the rest of the episode, since she can't reverse it, Twilight helps out with her friends in helping each other in proactively getting back to their own proper place. Twilight then figures out the words on finishing Star's world's spell, thus bringing up the second half of the finale. The elements of harmony teleported her to a space dimension where Princess Celestia meets up with. Through a detour of the previous episode clips and a first-time ever song from Celestia, she tells Twilight about her accomplishment of a spell that Starsworld couldn't figure out. He didn't understand friendship as much as Twilight did, and as a special benefit and reward, Twilight is then crowned as an Alicorn princess. This is as straightforward as it can get. It was a massively energetic, adrenaline-rushing, well-executed, and extremely overwhelmingly positive episode to no end. The animation is great, the visuals were great, the songs were fun, and the atmosphere was just unbelievably awesome to feel. My heart was pumping when watching this. Unfortunately, at the same time, I was thinking to myself, man, this is never going to calm down. It's just going to go on. And that's what the biggest problem here was. This finale was way too rushed. Everything was so fast-paced that after finishing the episode, there was not a minute to spare or breathe or indulge or digest a second of detail. From a 22-minute length, it almost felt like it was half the time when watching it. It's from this point forward, this should have been split into two parts. There would have been the same amount of excitement, but with the extra time to breathe. But instead, it's just exciting moment after exciting moment after exciting moment. And it kills me to criticize that to death. It was so much fun, but it also amounts to one massive flaw. What was the full detail behind Starsworld? I mean, hell, I didn't even know he was a mentor of Celestia. Wherever did they explain that role? I'll admit, I'm being too nitpicky here. In the writer's defense, being Emily Larson on this one, the staff was pretty forced by Hasbro since they're just eager to sell the toys and entertain the young girls. As you can already tell throughout most of their time, there's been a lot of aggravation between them. I'll not go far off topic on that, but the amount of pressure the writers had to assemble and write out, it's their biggest obstacle that remains to be. It's pretty easy to say that with all the issues with the staff and their struggles that they face, they put forth as much effort as possible here, and clearly the episode shows. If DHX Media can pull that off, then you can pretty much tell they exploit on all the quality as best they can. Unlike some corporations who pretty much care for money and money only. Upon further defense, some people really enjoy the fast pacing instead of watching a story split into two, feeling it's too watered down or by exposition. I understand their perspective, but I personally prefer exposition and time for creative merits to exploit upon, especially considering that's the show's biggest highlight of entertainment. The musical numbers work here very effectively. From Morning in Ponyville to different songs provided, Daniel Ingram did a bang-up job composing every single one of them. I can't go over all the songs since there's way too many to go by, but I will go over my personal favorites. I've Got to Find a Way as a good start, bringing out that letdown feel where you can really sympathize with Twilight's frustration. I especially love its build-up through its dull color scheme and the R&B beat. It really makes me feel cold as the song builds up. Next is A True True Friend. I love that the main six are gathered together and helping one another, and it really establishes the meaning of friendship, hence the title, and Starsworld's spell. The song really pays off with its large drums near the end of the song. And lastly, Celestia's ballad. This to me was a huge surprise. The fact that Celestia had her own musical number, this was something I was never expecting throughout the show. There have been some questions and talk in the past about Nicole Oliver on behalf of this, but since the show had a long run so far, I thought it was never going to happen. Furthermore, Nicole did a great job on her part. William Anderson is of course no exception to the background music. After Celestia's ballad, I was sucked into his music about Twilight's transformation sequence and the exposure of her wings in Ponyville. I also love how the moral tackles on destiny and how you can sometimes have to explore upon yourself to new opportunities. The way the other characters intend to be proactive, it really shows. That I find to be a better direction instead of some random spell that Twilight wanted to find. Many of us in our lives wanted to do something at one point, but we wind up as something else. I won't go too personal, but life is full of risks, and for the most part, it involves reaching out your comfort zone. If the main six didn't explore society's contributions, they wouldn't have reached out their comfort zone and go back to their heart's content. And of course, there's the biggest highlight of the episode, Twilight as an Alicorn. People went nuts over this, Anger was spread throughout the fandom. It spiraled out of control so much that satirical reaction videos were made with no hesitation. What do I think of this whole direction of the series? Well, I too felt uncomfortable about this, but at the same time, I already suspected this to happen. A lot of us did. What made me feel uncomfortable about it was that I predicted it would have been a conclusion to the entire series. Hell, the way the episode was played out, it felt like a series finale. All the showings of the previous episodes, flashbacks reminding us good times of the series, and the overall drama that was crammed in throughout the whole episode. Yeah, that felt like a finale, but it wasn't. Though ironically, A Candlelight Wedding felt more like a movie instead of a two-parter. The action, the build-up to an unexpected twist, the musical numbers, an overall epic story about suspicion and change in family dilemmas, and the somewhat Disney feel from the Age of Renaissance. But I digress. Mystery Magic Cure is set up for the next season. Well, that and Hasbro wanted it to be a new toy campaign. But for more about Twilight as an Alicorn, I'm going to save that for later. So while this was heavily rushed, was it entertaining? You bet your ass it was. But it's heavily flawed. It's too cram-packed with too little time to breathe, and there's so little detail that can be explained more by a need of more time. I guess it can be explained in Season 4 for any mythological points of the show. I can at least hope so. I personally enjoy this finale, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's great. I actually want to love this episode, and I almost do. But again, the one massive flaw swings by, and it's just so distracting. I know I'm beating a dead horse, no pun intended, but it seriously can't be ignored. But on a whole, I take it for what it is. The songs were great, the plot elements were great, and the moral was nice, and the optimistic feel is just incredible. And that's enough to satisfy my entertainment. All we can do now is just wait for what Season 4 beholds. Looking over the episodes and taking in a strong initiation, how does the season hold up? Was it really as bad as people said it was? Is it really considered to be the worst of the series? Well, no, I wouldn't want to go that far. You could argue in saying that, yeah, there's no denying the fact that in comparison to the other two seasons, it's admittedly the weakest. Did the series not make much of a direction for most of the main six? Was it really true that the majority of the episodes were pretty rushed, especially the second half? All signs point to yes, but not all of it was a miss. While it may have a lot of room for improvement, you can't really dwell on the flaws of the season. While there were 13 episodes instead of 26, I personally half expected the episodes to be better on quality since there may have been a lot more time on their hands. But alas, that wasn't the case since Hasbro's been pushing on them and marketing the toys, so it's been a difficult situation for DHX to handle. They had to continue on pursuing the episodes without a moment's opportunity to balance out the quality as best they can. But the staff is very well aware of what to make, so they do everything they can to make sure that the quality is still sustainable. With what Hasbro commits to, the writers are sure enough and capable of moving around the blocks that could potentially lead the series in the wrong direction. And you have to admit, that's a pretty difficult task for them to accomplish overall. Now, on Hasbro's behalf, while I have admittedly been pointing fingers at them, they have their reasons for their doings. Whenever they sell the toys, the products will eventually be dated by the amount of people buying them. And when almost every kid on the block has that toy, the chances are they will no longer be marketable, and thus they have to make another product. In this case, Twilight as an Alicorn may have been their best option for that kind of reason, which even though it affects the series, it's their marketing campaign as it still exceeds. As much as I hate bringing this up, and since Lauren Faust would probably be pissed off hearing about this, the truth of the matter is, the purpose of the show being a toy-selling campaign is really inevitable. Now, I'm not trying to defend Hasbro here, but I'm just pointing this out as an understanding between the two. But to advise on Hasbro, they should at least be more aware of what they're doing to the show if they plan more of another marketing strategy. Like that's ever going to happen. Now, with that said, what was my issue with Season 3? Well, for starters, most of the time, there were a lot of missed opportunities. There are several examples, but I'll only name a few since I don't want to use too much time here ranting about this. The first example was King Sombra in the Crystal Empire. Most of us know he was a huge letdown because of how underplayed he really was. Truth be told, however, in a discussion with Dusty Cat, writer Megan McCarthy intended to write this character as an inspiration from King Sauron from Lord of the Rings, which in short wanted this character to be made as a mysterious sense of darkness in the background. I'd accept that, but Megan, the problem here is that you already had him set up as a physical character. Look, he even faces shining armor and disables his horn in the blizzard. In Lord of the Rings, while Sauron had a form of existence and even a backstory, his power was only in the ring that needed to be tossed in the fiery pits of Mordor. He was a spiritual presence who was capable of putting psychological conflicts in Frodo and Sam, and even Bilbo as it was held in their possession. This results in a background sense of darkness. In the Crystal Empire, the only psychological conflict was when Twilight stumbled upon her greatest fear, and that was only a trapdoor being set up. If something like this was the cause, I would have loved to have seen that done from Sombra himself in his spiritual form and not a giant ball of gas. Additionally, what would have made him a lot more mysterious is if not even Celestia knows about him. The disappearance of the Crystal Empire could be held as a mystery itself instead of making Sombra a dead giveaway through its backstory. This could have also exploded on Twilight's test, as she was intended to provide protection for the Crystal Empire. In the case of Magic Duel, I'll admit that I have been very picky on this episode while everyone else loved it. But I'm not the only one who had issues with this episode. As I bring up another reviewer, Strabaskunk pointed out the humor was deteriorating the potential tone of the episode. After watching his review, it's exactly what my problem was. The humor was overused and it ruined a lot of potential. When I was talking about the fight scenes between Trixie and Twilight, I wasn't expecting actual laser beams according to the comments. I was expecting actual fighting. And I know some of you would already tell me that it's too much to ask for since it's a show for a younger audience. I'd accept that if not for the finale of Season 2. If the writers in A Candlelight Wedding can pull this off, I see no problem adding this kind of level here. Now this of course brings up the topic in which I feel the viewers could be suspicious about on my reviews. Am I really expecting the show to get dark, violent beyond boundaries? Am I really expecting characters to die like when I talked about AJ's parents? Absolutely not. That really deteriorates the show's overall tone. It's supposed to be lighthearted and colorful, which is also a different perspective on how there's a form of escapism from reality. I'm not really expecting as much as you think I am, but I am expecting the show to take risks. Season 2 did that, and to this day, I still enjoy watching those episodes. Hurricane Fluttershy still gets me emotionally invested into Fluttershy's struggles about past fears and putting them behind you to move on. Lesson 0 felt almost like an Invader Zim episode, as it also carved out new grounds for the characters to develop and expand the show. And A Candlelight Wedding. Need I say more? As many have pointed this out before, just because it's a show for kids doesn't mean you talk down to them. With Season 3, it almost felt like that. However, it didn't go that far, and there have been some risks that have been taken, but just not as many. So setting aside many of the shortcomings, there's still some that has been accomplished. While it may not have achieved on all the character motives, it has made stepping stones for Rainbow Dash by having her proceed her goal to become a Wonderbolt. That's something I've been waiting a long time for, and I was finally glad to see that continue. Plus, Scootaloo had her very own episode for once, and a very meaningful one as well. It served what was needed for both the connections between her and Dash, and I do hope to see more of that. This to me makes up for what Season 2 missed as much as I loved it. There were a few questions people had on Season 2, and Season 3 actually offered some of those answers. In addition, while I said I like it when the show takes risks, it did something in which could have been inappropriate for kids, but were handled so well. The talk about fear, as shown in both the Crystal Empire and Sleepless in Ponyville. It established the way you think about what really fears you. It's a draft that we all face in life, and to its advantage, it helped this series raise some levels on what challenges to face. And even though the fandom was very skeptical on alternating character arcs, I have to give the staff credit for actually pulling this off and doing it well, even if people disagree with me. The fandom had their own fears on that, which couldn't be any more coincidental. And of course, we're now cut back to Twilight as an alicorn, and the one big question narrows down to this. Since she's now a princess, what am I to expect on Season 4? What is there I hope to see? What can we all hope for? Well, on the one hand, she's going to be taken in the direction of bigger responsibilities and new challenges. So I expect she might make political acts that could mostly be cost-effective. Potentially, there could be an episode which she can make her friends jealous because of her arc. Or she'd get pressured on something she may be forced to choose over them, which can also establish another sense of proactivity. Additionally, her actions might exceed their motives, or the worst case scenario is if the main six are completely overshadowed throughout the whole season, which I seriously hope not. I also hope to see more of Celestia and Luna often now that she is a princess and she could have more interaction with them. I seriously want answers on them, since they have so much mythological background that I've wanted to hear about it, as well as possibly many others. Plus, she may be open to explore more of Equestria, which sounds really exciting as it would expand the mythology, which isn't a good way to treat young viewers as adults. For anything else aside from Twilight, I normally expect more character development and more challenges for them to encounter. In addition, I'm interested in knowing more about Princess Cadance and Shining Armor, since there was so little detail on them. Plus, I hope to see more of Discord and what he would do throughout the series as well, since now he was reformed, and hopefully provide more backstory on him and Celestia. Trixie, of course, can't be forgotten. Is there more redeeming ability she'll have to earn? Are we going to see Gilda again? Are we going to see Queen Chrysalis again, but with a vengeance? These are the many questions that have yet to be answered for me. But with all this said and done, while I have my own beliefs, it's really best that we keep our expectations blank, as accountable as it is to estimate what could possibly happen. So getting to the bottom line here, as Season 3 may be under the inferiority so far, not all of it was bad. As I pointed out, there is credit to be given, and that's something to take for granted and not dwell on the shortcomings all the time. So for all else, all we could do is wait and see what happens. Our expectations could be what the season offers, or it wouldn't. I am, needless to say, very trusty on the staff, so I'm not too worried here. We do have to wait for winter as it arrives for Season 4, so that gives us plenty of time to cool off. Plus, we get 26 episodes again. So until next time, best of luck to the staff on Season 4.